Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you a book review from the Most Wanted series, and it's book number 2, Son of Slappy. I am thoroughly impressed with this book. I have been on a Most Wanted slump recently. I've read some not so good ones the past couple of reviews, but after reading this, I have to tip my hat to Stein. I love the experimental ideas he went to in this book with Slappy. To put into perspective, this is the 7th Slappy book I have ever read. I've read Night 1 through 3, which I have not reviewed on the channel as of yet, but I do plan on reviewing those 3 books after this book review at some point. And I have not reviewed Bride yet as well, but I've read all 4 of those, the 4 original Slappy books. I've read Slappy's Nightmare, which I have reviewed on the channel, and I've read the short story he was in Goosebumps Live on Stage Screams in the Night, which I also have reviewed on the channel. So this is the 7th Slappy-centric story I've read. I haven't read any of the books he has in Horrorland or in Slappy World, dedicated to just him, or the ones he appears in. But I have to say, yeah, this story got to me. It's very messed up. It takes a different route to a Slappy book. And I'm being honest, I'm not a die-hard Slappy fan at all. I'm more of a casual fan. Like, I like Slappy, but I don't really love Slappy. But this book I do love. I liked how Stein went for a different style to tell a dummy book. And I hear the biggest criticisms with this book is the cover is misleading. There's no real Son of Slappy. Spoiler, really, there is no dummy kid right here. Just going to be honest. And another big complaint people have is Slappy's hardly in the book. But looking past that, I really appreciate Stein going out of his way to write something like this and try it. And it was very effective. It was very unsettling in some ways and very messed up. Which I can really appreciate when Stein does something like this. So, yeah. Let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So this kid named Jackson, he's one of the goody two-shoes in Goosebumps. He's just a really good kid. He means well in everything he does. He's forthright, he's honest, he helps kids in need at the youth center, he volunteers his time, he cares about his community. He's even nice to his sister, who's always mean to him. He's just that kind of kid. And his sister's name is Rachel, by the way. And you'll see the comparison in the story, especially early on with Jackson and Rachel, that Jackson's the good kid in the family, and Rachel is the problem child. As a matter of fact, that's what Jackson's parents call Rachel indirectly, is the problem child. So after Jackson reveals a little bit about himself, this story kind of gets into like narration almost with Jackson in the beginning. Jackson and Rachel's mom announces that they will be going to stay at their grandfather's house, who kind of lives far away, who they hardly get to see. When Jackson and Rachel arrive, they are greeted by their grandfather's butler, who's this creepy old bald guy who I think picks them up from the bus station, something like that, and takes them over to their grandfather's house. And the grandfather is this eclectic collector guy. He's kind of big and burly. Have you ever seen the show American Pickers? He would kind of remind me of somebody that would be on that show that the 2 guys would go and pick stuff off of. He's that kind of guy. He collects like comic books, old memorabilia, and the weirdest collection he has is dummies and ventriloquist dummies. When Jackson and Rachel arrive to their grandfather's house, they are greeted by their grandfather, open with welcome arms, and Jackson is drawn to his grandfather by his collecting and all of his stories he has to tell. And Rachel thinks that Jackson is just kissing butt. He doesn't really mean anything, and he tries to call him out on it a few times, but Jackson's not hearing anything of it. Eventually, Jackson gets to see his grandfather's dummy collection, within his collection, there is this really creepy ventriloquist dummy, which his grandfather's butler is extremely afraid of and warns the two kids to stay away from that dummy. He's pure evil. And his grandfather reveals that this dummy is called the son of Slappy. Now, we all know who Slappy is, but in the story, he's treated like the kids don't know who Slappy is. So the grandfather has some background knowledge of Slappy, some severe, like really good knowledge, that he was made by an evil sorcerer using this special wood. However, the original Slappy was destroyed. And this Slappy that the grandfather owns is a copy of Slappy. So there's no way that the evil that lived in with the original Slappy is inside of this copy. So Jackson is mesmerized, and Rachel, is, like, why does he care so much about, the grandfather's hobby, And then Jackson's kind of creeped out by the dummy as well. Like, he's like, this dummy does look kind of weird and look very creepy. Like, the eyes stare at you, the lips are like bright red. It's very descriptive, okay? But it comes time after the visit with the grandfather is over. They have to say goodbye and get taken back to the bus station and come home. So when Jackson arrives home, there's a couple things going on. First, there's the youth center that he attends is doing this event to raise money. Jackson realizes that the youth center he attends and helps with is running out of funds and they could be closing. So to kind of get funds to last them through another year, they're doing this charity where they're having a bake sale and a talent show with ticket admissions to help the youth center gain some money. And Jackson, like I said, he's very involved with this youth center. He wants to contribute and help as much as he can with the youth center director that he communicates with. However, Jackson discovers that this son of Slappy doll is in his backpack and somehow traveled with him back home. Now, this kind of sets Jackson off a little bit. He's like, well, how did this dummy get in my backpack? He thinks that maybe it was put there by mistake. Maybe his grandfather gave it to him. So he's proud to have it and take care of it until he can see his grandfather again and maybe give Slappy, the son of Slappy, back to his grandfather. Now, there comes an event where, a little bit after, Rachel picks up the son of Slappy and pulls out this card that's in the son of Slappy's pocket. It is the textbook Kari Maru spell that activates Slappy. But since it's son of Slappy, he shouldn't activate. And she reads the spell and leaves the room, and basically nothing happens as of yet. So Jackson and his two friends, his two best friends, are trying to find out something to make for the youth center event that's coming up, and they come up with this idea to maybe use this giant dog bathtub that's made of metal and make a giant cupcake out of it. And Jackson's friend's mom slams them for it, saying, hey, these ideas aren't really that good. And Jackson has to leave and go home, and he was very hyped, and he's going to go home and rethink some ideas to help the youth center. However, when he gets home, this is where the story shifts, and he comes through his bedroom door, and lo and behold, the son of Slappy is alive. Now, there's a big revelation here. The son of Slappy doesn't exist. The Slappy that is in Jackson's bedroom is the real Slappy. And he reveals this to Jackson. And he basically says, you will now become the son of Slappy. And this is where all the criticism comes. It's not a literal dummy, it's Jackson now. So Slappy puts some type of curse on Jackson, and throughout the rest of the story, as it unfolds, Jackson will be victim to this curse. Now, to give you kind of a description before anything else, the curse Jackson is under is basically kind of like, like a hypnotist will snap his fingers or say like a code word or something to somebody when they're unconscious under, their control. and then when they say the code word or the trigger sound, it'll make them do something. That's basically what Slappy has done to Jackson. Slappy has hypnotized Jackson to basically obey him and imitate his behavior no matter what. And this is kind of disturbing in the story because Jackson, remember, is a good kid. And this is where Jackson starts falling off the wagon. He starts doing bad stuff. It all starts when he goes to school and he goes to his art class and he ruins everybody's art project in there and blames it on a bunch of rabid dogs that somehow broke into his art classroom and escaped out of the window. Jackson avoided blame there, and then, of course, later in the story, Jackson had his aunt and uncle come over with his cousin Noah, and Jackson had to go down and have dinner with his aunt and uncle. Now, this is where Jackson has a public outburst this time that he's being very rude and making some very harsh comments and doing some very mean things to his family members that are over to visit. He goes upstairs. His sister tries to come ask him what's wrong. He tries to tell her the truth, and then the hypnotist effect activates and he goes off on her. And then, his parents start to worry about Jackson. They say, maybe Jackson has lost his marbles a little bit. Maybe Jackson has gone kind of crazy a little bit. Jackson has to convince his parents that he's starting to feel better. When he does have a few days without an episode, there's a scene with a kid, like a little kid, has a tennis racket and his bike is stuck or something, and Jackson goes to help, but then the spell activates and he's a really big jerk to the kid, makes the kid cry. His neighbor chases him. And then there's a scene where he goes and tries to help his friends with the bake sale, trying to make some, just normal sized cupcakes this time, and he basically destroys his friend's mom's kitchen. And Jackson has basically made everybody in his life mad at him. He's gone from the good kid to he's now considered a crazy kid or a problem child. And the youth center event is coming up, but he's grounded basically for having mental, he's mentally unstable basically. There's a commentary on mental illness in this. He has to go to a doctor, he gets prescribed medicine, which he's not taking because he says it doesn't work or something like that. And he makes everybody feel sad for him on the night of the event. But lo and unbeknownst to everybody else, he's secretly going to go. And his plan is to take Slappy after he discovered that this hypnotizing mechanism that Slappy's been using throughout the story. He discovers what it is and thinks he has figured out how to way to cheat it. It's with this trusty game player that he carries around with a game called Chirping Chickens. And it's called Game Player. This is a running gag in modern Stein books. Sometimes he'll call it a Game Boy, sometimes he'll call it a Nintendo DS, sometimes he'll call it a Game Player. But it's a game player in this. So he leaves his game player at home. He's like, I found out what you're doing, Slappy. You're under my control now. So he goes to the talent show because he wants to, people pay for tickets. He wants to help out the youth center and give a show, help. And then, of course, this big old scene happens with him and Slappy. Big ordeal happens. And let's just say Jackson doesn't come out victorious in the situation. The events have unfolded. Jackson's basically become the ridicule of his community. He's no longer allowed to go to the rec center. All of the things he loves has basically been stripped away from him. And then this very twisted ending, this big revelation happens at the end. And let's just say Jackson's ending is even worse than the majority of the book was going for him. And I'll leave it at that. So yeah, this book was pretty dark, pretty twisted, I have to say. The strengths on this book, overall, I really enjoyed the rise and fall of Jackson. And it felt very real. And it's very rare in Goosebumps where you have a genuine good character that ends up having something horrible happen to them, and then the ending is still horrible for them. I mean, Jekyll and Heidi was kind of like that, but in Heidi's situation, she always had, like, you know, the short end of the stick her entire life, or at least around that time when all those events were happening in that book. As in this book, Jackson had everything going right for him, and then everything was stripped away. And it felt so relatable. It felt like somebody down on their luck, or maybe somebody who got caught in bad things. And like this, the commentary in this book, like I said, it's experimental for a Slappy book. Most of the time, the main protagonists are kids out to get revenge on their siblings, or they're just into ventriloquism. Jackson, however, is into helping people, and he didn't ask for Slappy to be in the book. And as you may remember, I did say that Rachel did activate Slappy, and Rachel is probably the most despicable character in this whole book, and everything that happens to Jackson basically is from Rachel's doing. So nothing really is Jackson's fault in this story. He's under hypnosis. He can't control what he is doing. And it plays on so many themes and elements that you hardly ever see in a Slappy book, let alone in a Goosebumps book told well. There's a lot of funny scenes, though, dealing with Jackson when he's under Slappy's hypnosis. There's a lot of jokes he says, and he says some really weird things, and he does some really messed up things, and it's pretty funny and fun at the same time. Also a little messed up for the people on the receiving end. But yeah, I really felt what Jackson was going through, and it really was a gut-wrencher, especially at the end. I just really enjoyed this book from start to finish. I couldn't put the book down. Like I said, the commentary, some of the strengths in here, it's commentating on getting wrapped up in bad things. I mean, you know, a fall from grace type of story. Really enjoyed it. But, you know, I do have a slight negative, and it kind of draws the story back for me. And the slight negative would be the fact that Jackson's sister is a thorn in the reading side. She's so unlikable, and I guess it's there on purpose, but considering that the actions done by her was the catalyst for the whole story, and Jackson ends up taking the punishment for Rachel's actions, I don't know if that's really fair. And you know, in the spirit of me not liking Rachel, I did deduct a few points, maybe like 0.2 off for her. And then there was some plot convenience in the book, I'm not going to lie. There was some mild padding going on that just felt too convenient for the story, especially when Jackson realizes the whole mechanism of how Slappy's controlling him. It comes out of nowhere, and there's no really exposition to how he came to that thought. It's kind of just like, he figured it out. So plot convenience was another deduction I had. I deducted 0.3 off. So I deducted 0.5 collectively and gave this book a 4.5 out of 5. Thought it was a really exceptional read. Really loved it. I don't see why people are so harsh on this book. I like the change in formula. I like the change in concept. I am kind of making this video longer just to reiterate that I support these ideas with Slappy. I support different ideas and different approaches than just reskinning Night of the Living Dummy books. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Son of Slappy. What do you guys think in the comment section if you have read this book? Did you love it or did you hate it? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.